Identifying toxic people, a journey through the shadows of human connection. In the quiet corners of our everyday lives, where relationships bloom and friendships take root, there exists a phenomenon that many of us will encounter, but few truly understand until it touches us directly. It is the presence of toxic people, individuals whose patterns of behavior leave invisible wounds, whose words create doubt where there was once certainty, and whose actions slowly erode the very foundation of our emotional well-being. Tonight, as you settle into this journey of understanding, we will explore the intricate landscape of toxicity in human relationships, examining not just what makes a person toxic, but how to recognize these patterns before they take hold of your life. Imagine standing at the edge of a forest at twilight. The trees cast long shadows, and not every path is clearly marked. Some trails lead to beautiful clearings filled with light and growth, while others wind deeper into darkness, becoming more treacherous with each step. Human relationships mirror this forest. Some people illuminate your path, helping you grow and flourish, while others, intentionally or not, lead you into places where your sense of self becomes lost, where your confidence withers like flowers deprived of sunlight. The concept of toxicity in relationships has gained significant attention in recent years, yet the phenomenon itself is as old as human interaction. To understand toxic people, we must first recognize that toxicity exists on a spectrum. It ranges from mildly draining behaviors to severe patterns of manipulation and abuse. The term toxic itself, while not a clinical diagnosis, has become shorthand for describing individuals whose consistent patterns of behavior cause harm, either to themselves or to those around them. These patterns chip away at emotional well-being, create confusion, and leave those in their orbit questioning their own perceptions and worth. Research into personality and behavior reveals that toxic traits often stem from a complex interplay of genetics, childhood experiences, and learned behaviors. Studies suggest that personality traits overall are moderately heritable, meaning that some people may be predisposed to certain behavioral patterns. However, environmental factors play an equally crucial role. Childhood experiences, particularly those involving trauma, neglect, or inconsistent parenting, can shape how a person learns to interact with the world. Someone who was overprotected or excessively praised as a child might develop narcissistic tendencies and feelings of entitlement. Conversely, someone who experienced abuse might internalize those patterns and repeat them in their adult relationships, either as victim or perpetrator. Understanding this origin does not excuse toxic behavior, but it provides context. The person who manipulates others, who tears down those around them, who cannot seem to maintain healthy relationships, they are often operating from a place of deep wounding. Yet this understanding must be balanced with a crucial truth. You are not responsible for healing someone else's brokenness, especially when their behavior is actively harming you. The first and perhaps most important step in identifying toxic people is learning to recognize the traits and behaviors that characterize toxicity. These patterns are not always obvious. Toxic individuals can be remarkably charming, especially in the beginning. They may seem exciting, passionate, and intensely interested in you. This initial phase, sometimes called the honeymoon period in romantic relationships, can make it extraordinarily difficult to see the warning signs that follow. One of the hallmark traits of toxic individuals is manipulation. Manipulation is the art of getting others to do what you want without direct, honest communication. It operates in shadows and implications rather than in the light of straightforward requests. A manipulative person might use guilt to control your behavior, making you feel responsible for their emotional state. They might employ what psychologists call emotional blackmail, threatening consequences either directly or indirectly if you do not comply with their wishes. For example, A friend might say they will harm themselves if you spend time with other people, or a partner might threaten to withdraw affection if you do not cancel your plans. The manipulation can be subtle. It might manifest as passive-aggressive behavior, those indirect expressions of anger that leave you confused and defensive. The silent treatment, for instance, is a powerful form of passive aggression. Rather than communicating their displeasure openly, the toxic person withdraws all communication, leaving you anxious and desperate to resolve a conflict you may not even understand. They might make snide comments disguised as jokes, criticize you under the guise of just being honest, or deliberately procrastinate on commitments to inconvenience you. Closely related to manipulation is the toxic trait of dishonesty. While everyone tells small lies occasionally, pathological dishonesty is different. A dishonest person lies constantly, often about things that seem inconsequential. They lie when the truth would serve them just as well. They deny events that you witnessed with your own eyes. They twist facts, omit crucial information, and refuse to admit their deceptions, even when confronted with undeniable proof. This pattern of dishonesty creates a fog of confusion in the relationship. You begin to question your own memory, your own perception of reality. This brings us to one of the most insidious forms of toxic behavior: gaslighting. The term comes from a 1930s British play called Gaslight, later adapted into a film called Gaslight. In the story, a husband attempts to make his wife believe she is losing her sanity by dimming the gas-powered lights in their home, and then denying that the lights have changed when she points it out. Modern gaslighting follows the same pattern. It is the deliberate manipulation of someone's perception of reality. Gaslighting operates through several mechanisms. First, there is denial of reality. The gaslighter insists that events did not happen, that conversations never took place, that promises were never made. Even when presented with evidence, text messages, emails, witnesses, they maintain their version of events with absolute conviction. Second, there is trivialization. The gaslighter dismisses your feelings as overreactions, tells you that you are too sensitive, suggests that you are imagining problems that do not exist. They belittle your emotions, making you feel that your responses to their behavior are the real problem. Third, there is reality manipulation. The gaslighter tells you that you said or did things that you have no memory of, insisting with such certainty that you begin to doubt your own recollection. The effect of sustained gaslighting is profound. Victims find themselves constantly second-guessing their own thoughts and perceptions. They ask themselves if they are too sensitive dozens of times a day. They apologize constantly, even when they have done nothing wrong. They feel confused and anxious, walking on eggshells to avoid triggering their partner's displeasure. Most devastatingly, they lose trust in their own judgment, becoming increasingly dependent on the gaslighter to define reality for them. Research into gaslighting and emotional abuse reveals that these behaviors often escalate gradually. The progression is so subtle that victims may not recognize what is happening until they are deeply enmeshed in the relationship. The gaslighter may initially seem caring and attentive, gradually introducing controlling behaviors that are rationalized as expressions of love or concern. Over time, the frequency and intensity of manipulation increase, while the victim's confidence and autonomy decrease. Another common trait among toxic individuals is an absence of empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person, to walk, as the saying goes, in someone else's shoes. It allows us to connect meaningfully with others, to respond with compassion when they are hurting, to celebrate genuinely when they succeed. Toxic people often lack this crucial emotional capacity. They struggle to understand or care about the feelings and needs of those around them. This absence of empathy manifests in various ways. A toxic person might dismiss your feelings entirely, showing indifference when you are upset or in pain. They might interrupt your expressions of emotion to redirect the conversation back to themselves. When you share good news, a promotion at work, a personal achievement, they might respond with thinly veiled jealousy or by immediately talking about their own superior accomplishments. They may make insensitive comments that wound you, then become annoyed when you express hurt, accusing you of being too sensitive, rather than acknowledging their lack of consideration. The inability to empathize is particularly evident in how toxic individuals handle conflict. Healthy conflict resolution requires the ability to see the other person's perspective, to acknowledge their feelings, even if you disagree with their conclusions. Toxic people cannot do this. They become defensive at the slightest criticism, unable to hear your concerns without immediately counterattacking. They refuse to take responsibility for their actions, always finding ways to shift blame onto you or onto external circumstances. This pattern of blame shifting is itself a distinctive toxic trait. No matter what goes wrong, it is never their fault. If they hurt you, it is because you provoked them. If they fail to keep a promise, it is because you did not remind them, or because circumstances beyond their control intervened. They are masters of deflection, turning every confrontation about their behavior into an examination of your flaws. This constant redirection leaves you feeling as though you are the problem in the relationship, as though all conflicts arise from your inadequacies rather than from their actions. Closely related to blame shifting is the toxic person's inability to apologize sincerely. While they may occasionally offer what appears to be an apology, it lacks genuine remorse or acknowledgement of wrongdoing. These non-apology apologies take various forms. "I am sorry you felt that way" places responsibility on your feelings rather than on their actions. "I am sorry, but you" follows the apology with a justification that negates it. "I am sorry if I did anything wrong" expresses no understanding of what they actually did. A genuine apology requires three elements: acknowledgement of the specific harmful action, expression of remorse, and commitment to change. Toxic individuals rarely, if ever, offer all three. The need for control is another defining characteristic of toxic people. They must dominate every situation, make every decision, orchestrate every aspect of shared experiences. This controlling behavior can range from subtle to overt. At the subtle end, they might always choose where you eat, what you do together, which friends you spend time with, and if you suggest alternatives, they find ways to undermine your preferences or make you feel guilty for not accommodating theirs. At the extreme end, controlling behavior becomes genuinely dangerous, restricting your movements, your access to money, your contact with friends and family. Control often masquerades as care. A partner might insist on knowing your whereabouts at all times, claiming they just worry about your safety. They might discourage you from spending time with certain friends, suggesting those friends are bad influences or do not have your best interests at heart. They might manage all the finances, saying they are better with money and you should not trouble yourself with such matters. But beneath these seemingly benign explanations lies a desire to dominate and a fear of your independence. Toxic people also demonstrate a pattern of creating drama and chaos. They thrive in crisis, seeming to generate emergencies and conflicts wherever they go. Just when life begins to feel stable and peaceful, they introduce some new problem, some new conflict that demands immediate attention and emotional energy. This pattern serves several purposes for the toxic individual. It keeps you off balance, always reactive rather than proactive. It ensures that your focus remains on them and their needs. And it provides them with the intense emotional stimulation they crave, as many toxic people are uncomfortable with calm and stability. The drama often centers around victimhood. Toxic individuals frequently cast themselves as perpetual victims of circumstance, of other people's malice, of bad luck that singles them out unfairly. Nothing is ever their responsibility. They are always being wronged, always suffering at the hands of others. This victim mentality serves to deflect responsibility and to garner sympathy. When you are focused on comforting them and validating their suffering, you cannot address the ways in which their behavior is actually harming you. Interestingly, this victim identity often coexists with a profound sense of entitlement. Toxic people believe that normal rules do not apply to them, that they deserve special treatment and special allowances. They cut in lines, take what is not theirs, demand that others accommodate their needs while showing no reciprocal consideration. They believe themselves to be special, somehow superior to those around them, deserving of admiration and deference. This entitlement reveals itself in countless small ways. The person who refuses to turn off their phone in a movie theater, who expects servers and service workers to tolerate their rudeness, who believes their time is more valuable than anyone else's. For some toxic individuals, this sense of superiority is part of a broader pattern associated with narcissistic personality traits. While only a mental health professional can diagnose narcissistic personality disorder, many toxic people display narcissistic characteristics. They have an inflated sense of their own importance, believe they are special and unique, and expect constant admiration and attention. They fantasize about unlimited success and power. They exploit others for their own gain and lack empathy for those they hurt in the process. Narcissistic individuals are often preoccupied with their appearance and how others perceive them. They need to be seen as successful, attractive, intelligent, and important. This need for external validation can make them initially quite charming and attentive. They pour energy into creating a favorable impression. But this charm is superficial, maintained, only as long as you serve their needs. Once they feel secure in your attachment, or once you cease to provide the admiration they require, the facade drops away, revealing the manipulation and exploitation beneath. The narcissistic pattern in relationships follows a predictable cycle: idealization, devaluation, and discard. In the idealization phase, you are perfect in their eyes. They shower you with attention, affection, and praise. This intense focus can feel intoxicating, like you have finally found someone who truly sees and appreciates you. But this idealization is not based on who you actually are. It is a projection of what they want you to be, a fantasy that serves their needs. Inevitably, reality intrudes. You reveal yourself to be human, with flaws and needs of your own. This shatters their fantasy, and the devaluation phase begins. Suddenly you can do nothing right. The same qualities they once praised become targets for criticism. They find fault with everything about you: your appearance, your intelligence, your choices. The affection and attention evaporate, replaced by coldness or outright cruelty. This phase is deeply destabilizing because you cannot understand what changed, what you did wrong to transform their love into contempt. The final stage is discard, in which they emotionally or physically leave the relationship, often moving on to a new target who can provide fresh admiration and attention. The discard can be sudden and brutal, leaving you reeling with confusion and pain. In some cases, toxic individuals cycle through these phases repeatedly with the same person, hooking them back in with periods of renewed idealization before the pattern repeats. One particularly dangerous manifestation of narcissistic behavior is love bombing. Love bombing is the practice of overwhelming someone with affection, attention, gifts, and grand gestures in the early stages of a relationship. On the surface, it can seem like the ultimate romantic fantasy. Someone is utterly captivated by you, cannot get enough of your presence, showers you with tokens of their devotion. But love bombing differs from genuine affection in crucial ways. It is excessive and moves too fast, creating a sense of intensity and urgency. It ignores boundaries and individual preferences, focusing instead on the bomber's need to secure your attachment. And it serves as a setup for later manipulation and control. Once the love bomber has secured your emotional investment, the behavior shifts. The excessive attention stops, often abruptly. Now that they feel confident in your attachment, they no longer need to maintain the illusion. Instead, they may introduce criticism, create distance, or employ other tactics to keep you off balance and insecure. You find yourself desperately trying to recapture those early moments of intensity, willing to overlook red flags and tolerate poor treatment in hopes of returning to how things were at the beginning. Beyond romantic relationships, toxic people create havoc in all areas of life. In friendships, in families, in workplaces, the manifestations may differ slightly in each context, but the core patterns remain consistent. In friendships, the toxic person might be the one who always needs something, but is never available when you need support. They drain your emotional energy with constant crises, yet when you face challenges of your own, they are mysteriously absent or dismissive. They might compete with you rather than celebrate your successes, turning every achievement into a comparison in which they must come out superior. Toxic family members present particular challenges because familial bonds are not easily severed, and societal expectations often pressure us to maintain these relationships regardless of the harm they cause. A toxic parent might undermine your confidence, criticize your choices, or manipulate you through guilt and obligation. They might play favorites among siblings, creating division and competition. Toxic siblings might engage in lifelong patterns of rivalry, jealousy, and resentment, unable or unwilling to develop adult relationships based on mutual respect and support. In the workplace, toxic individuals can take the form of bosses, colleagues, or subordinates. A toxic boss might take credit for your work while blaming you for their failures. They might create an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty, keeping employees off balance and insecure about their standing. Toxic coworkers might engage in gossip, sabotage others' projects, or use manipulation to advance their own careers at others' expense. The workplace presents particular vulnerabilities because employment relationships involve power dynamics and economic dependencies that toxic individuals can exploit. Recognizing toxic people requires paying attention not just to specific behaviors, but to patterns and their effects on you. One of the most reliable indicators is how you feel after spending time with someone. Do you leave interactions feeling energized, valued, and uplifted? Or do you feel drained, confused, anxious, or diminished? Healthy relationships, even when they involve difficult conversations or conflicts, ultimately leave you feeling respected and supported. Toxic relationships leave you questioning yourself, walking on eggshells, and feeling worse about yourself and your life. Another key indicator is reciprocity, or the lack thereof. Healthy relationships involve give and take, with both parties investing in each other's well-being and happiness. Toxic relationships are fundamentally one-sided. The toxic person's needs always take precedence. Their problems are always more urgent. Their feelings are always more valid. When you express needs or assert boundaries, they respond with anger, guilt-tripping, or emotional withdrawal. The relationship exists to serve them, and your role is to provide support, admiration, and compliance. Pay attention to how someone handles disagreement and conflict. Healthy people can disagree respectfully, hear different perspectives, and work toward mutually acceptable solutions. Toxic people cannot tolerate disagreement. They see any difference of opinion as a personal attack, any boundary as a rejection. They may explode in anger, shut down entirely, or punish you emotionally for not agreeing with them. Conflict becomes not an opportunity to understand each other better, but a battle to be won. Notice whether someone takes responsibility for their actions or consistently blames others. Everyone makes mistakes, hurts people unintentionally, acts selfishly at times. The difference is that healthy people can acknowledge these failings, apologize sincerely, and work to do better. Toxic people cannot. Every problem is someone else's fault. Every conflict arises from another's inadequacy. They are perpetual victims of circumstance, never the authors of their own difficulties. Consider how someone speaks about others, particularly people who are not present. Do they gossip constantly, sharing intimate details about others' lives without permission? Do they speak cruelly about people who cannot defend themselves? How someone treats waiters, retail workers, and other service people reveals their true character. If they are rude, dismissive, or condescending to those with less power, they will eventually treat you the same way once they feel secure in the relationship. Watch for patterns of isolation. Toxic people often work to separate you from your support system. They might express dislike for your friends and family, planting seeds of doubt about those relationships. They might create conflicts that force you to choose between them and others. They might demand so much of your time and energy that you naturally drift away from other connections. This isolation serves their purposes, making you more dependent on them and less likely to receive outside perspectives that might help you recognize the toxicity of the relationship. The damage that toxic people inflict extends far beyond the immediate discomfort of their behavior. Prolonged exposure to toxic individuals can have profound effects on mental health, physical health, and overall quality of life. Research consistently demonstrates that toxic relationships elevate stress hormones, compromise immune function, and increase vulnerability to both mental and physical health conditions. The psychological effects are particularly insidious because they reshape how you see yourself and the world. Constant criticism erodes self-esteem, leaving you doubting your worth, your capabilities, your very right to take up space in the world. You may develop anxiety, always hypervigilant for signs of displeasure or impending conflict. Depression can set in as hope drains away and the future looks increasingly bleak. Some people develop symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, including intrusive thoughts, nightmares, emotional numbness, and an exaggerated startle response. The impact on self-worth is perhaps the most devastating consequence. Over months or years of being told, directly or indirectly, that you are inadequate, unintelligent, unattractive, or unlovable, these messages become internalized. You begin to believe them. Even after leaving a toxic relationship, these deeply embedded beliefs continue to influence how you see yourself and what you believe you deserve. Many survivors of toxic relationships struggle with feelings of worthlessness long after the relationship has ended. Toxic relationships also affect your ability to trust both others and yourself. When someone you love or depend on consistently manipulates, lies to, or betrays you, it becomes difficult to believe that anyone can be trusted. You may find yourself suspicious of kindness, waiting for the other shoe to drop, unable to accept that someone might genuinely care for you without ulterior motive. Perhaps even more damaging is the loss of self-trust. When you have been gaslit and manipulated, when your perceptions have been consistently invalidated, you stop trusting your own judgment. You second-guess every decision, every instinct, every feeling. The isolation that toxic people create has its own harmful effects. Humans are fundamentally social creatures. We need connection, belonging, and community. When toxic individuals cut you off from support systems, you lose not just those specific relationships, but the benefits that social connection provides: emotional support, practical help, different perspectives, validation of your experiences. This isolation intensifies the effects of the toxic relationship itself, as you have no outside reference points to help you recognize that the treatment you are receiving is neither normal nor acceptable. Physical health suffers as well. Chronic stress from toxic relationships keeps your body in a state of high alert, with stress hormones like cortisol flooding your system. This state of constant activation takes a toll. You may experience sleep disturbances with difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep as your mind races with worries or replays conflicts. Your appetite may change. Some people lose interest in food while others turn to eating as a coping mechanism. Stress can manifest as headaches, digestive problems, muscle tension, or chronic pain. Long-term exposure to toxic relationships increases risk for serious health conditions. Studies link chronic stress to cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, weakened immune function, and inflammatory conditions. The body and mind are not separate systems, but deeply interconnected. The psychological trauma of a toxic relationship registers in the body, leaving physical imprints that persist long after the relationship ends. Perhaps most tragically, toxic relationships can shape your expectations and patterns in future relationships. If you grew up in a toxic family environment, those dynamics may feel normal to you, and you might unconsciously seek out similar patterns in adult relationships. Even if you consciously want something different, you may find yourself drawn to people who recreate familiar dynamics, as our psyche often attempts to recreate and resolve old wounds through new relationships. This can lead to a pattern of repeatedly entering toxic relationships, each one reinforcing the belief that you do not deserve better. Understanding how toxic people operate, their patterns, their tactics, their effects, is crucial, but understanding alone is not enough. The next essential step is learning how to protect yourself, how to establish and maintain boundaries that preserve your well-being. Boundaries are limits we set to protect our physical, emotional, and mental health. They define what treatment we will accept and what we will not, what we are willing to give and what we need to receive. Healthy boundaries are not walls built to shut others out entirely. They are more like gates that can open and close, allowing connection while maintaining protection. With toxic people, however, boundaries often need to be much firmer because toxic individuals do not respect normal boundaries. They push, test, and violate limits consistently. Setting boundaries with toxic people begins with clarity about what you need and what you will no longer tolerate. This requires honest self-reflection. What behaviors leave you feeling disrespected, hurt, or diminished? What patterns in this relationship are harming your well-being? What needs to change for you to feel safe and valued? These questions help you identify where boundaries are needed. Once you have clarity about your boundaries, the next step is communicating them. This communication should be clear, direct, and non-negotiable. Avoid lengthy explanations or justifications, as toxic people will use these as ammunition, arguing with your reasoning or finding loopholes in your logic. A boundary is not a request or an opening for discussion. It is a statement of what you will and will not accept. I will not lend you money again. I will not tolerate being spoken to disrespectfully. I need advance notice before visits, not drop-ins. State the boundary simply and firmly. Communicating a boundary is only the first part. The crucial element is enforcement. Boundaries without enforcement are merely suggestions, and toxic people will ignore them if there are no consequences for violation. Enforcement means following through with the consequences you have established when boundaries are crossed. If you said you would end a phone call if someone yelled at you, you must actually end the call when yelling occurs. If you establish that unannounced visits are not acceptable, you must not answer the door when someone shows up without notice, even if they guilt-trip you or accuse you of being cruel. Enforcing boundaries with toxic people is extraordinarily difficult. They will test your resolve repeatedly. They may escalate their behavior when you first start setting limits, a phenomenon psychologists call an extinction burst, a last-ditch effort to return things to the old dynamic where they had control. They may rage, cry, plead, or withdraw affection. They may accuse you of being mean, selfish, or unreasonable. They may recruit others to pressure you to relent. Standing firm in the face of these tactics requires tremendous strength and support. One of the most important truths about boundaries with toxic people is that you cannot make them respect your boundaries. You can only control your own responses when boundaries are violated. If someone continues to violate a boundary despite clear communication and consistent enforcement, you are faced with a difficult choice. Accept that this is who they are and adjust your expectations accordingly, or remove yourself from the relationship. For some toxic relationships, the healthiest boundary is distance or complete separation. This is particularly true in cases of abuse, severe manipulation, or relationships where contact consistently harms your well-being despite your best efforts to establish healthier dynamics. Going low contact or no contact means limiting or eliminating interaction with the toxic person. This might mean blocking their number and social media accounts, avoiding places where you are likely to encounter them, or declining invitations to events where they will be present. The decision to limit or end contact with a toxic person is never easy, especially when that person is a family member or someone you once cared for deeply. Society often pressures us to maintain relationships regardless of how harmful they are, particularly family relationships. You may face criticism from others who do not understand why you are creating distance. But maintaining a relationship with someone who consistently harms you is not noble or loving. It is self-destructive. You have the right to protect yourself, even from people who are supposed to love you. In situations where complete separation is not possible, such as co-parenting relationships, workplace dynamics, or extended family situations you cannot avoid, the focus shifts to creating emotional and psychological boundaries. This means learning to detach from the toxic person's attempts to manipulate or control you. You attend the family gathering but have an exit strategy and limit your one-on-one time with the toxic relative. You maintain professional interactions with the difficult coworker but do not engage in personal conversations or take their bait when they try to provoke you. Detachment does not mean you stop caring entirely. It means you stop allowing someone else's dysfunction to dictate your emotional state. You observe their behavior without absorbing it. You hear their criticism without internalizing it. You recognize their manipulation without falling for it. This emotional distancing takes practice and often requires support from a therapist who can help you develop the skills to maintain these boundaries. Self-care becomes paramount when dealing with toxic people. The stress and emotional drain of these relationships require active counterbalancing. Self-care is not selfish. It is necessary maintenance of your well-being. This includes physical care, adequate sleep, nutritious food, regular movement, time in nature. It includes emotional care, journaling to process your experiences, engaging in activities that bring you joy, allowing yourself to feel and express the full range of emotions these relationships evoke. It includes social care, nurturing relationships with people who are healthy and supportive, seeking out communities where you feel valued and understood. One particularly valuable form of self-care when dealing with toxic relationships is therapy. A skilled therapist provides a safe space to process your experiences, validate your perceptions, and develop strategies for protection and healing. They can help you identify patterns you may not see clearly yourself, challenge the negative beliefs toxic people have instilled, and rebuild your sense of self-worth. Different therapeutic approaches may be helpful depending on your situation. Cognitive behavioral therapy can help you identify and change thought patterns that keep you stuck. Trauma-focused therapy may be necessary if you have developed post-traumatic stress symptoms. Dialectical behavior therapy teaches skills for emotion regulation and interpersonal effectiveness that are particularly useful in navigating difficult relationships. Support groups also offer tremendous value. Connecting with others who have experienced similar relationships combats the isolation toxic people create. Hearing others describe experiences that mirror your own validates that you are not imagining things, not overreacting, not the problem. These groups provide both emotional support and practical strategies, as members share what has and has not worked in their own journeys of boundary setting and healing. Documentation can be an important tool when dealing with toxic people, particularly in situations where their manipulation might have legal implications or where you need to maintain a record for your own clarity. Keep records of troubling interactions. Save text messages and emails. Write down conversations as soon after they occur as possible. Note dates and details of significant incidents. This documentation serves multiple purposes. It provides evidence if you need to involve authorities or pursue legal protections. It helps you recognize patterns you might otherwise minimize or forget. And it serves as a reality check when the toxic person tries to gaslight you about what happened. For those dealing with particularly toxic people who engage in stalking, harassment, or threats, more formal protections may be necessary. This might include restraining orders involving law enforcement or working with legal counsel to establish protective measures. Do not hesitate to pursue these options if you feel unsafe. Your safety is paramount, and people who threaten or harm you are demonstrating behavior that requires intervention beyond what you can manage on your own. Understanding when and how to exit toxic relationships entirely requires acknowledging several uncomfortable truths. First, some people will not change no matter how much you hope, how hard you try, or how many chances you give them. Change requires acknowledgement of problematic behavior and genuine motivation to transform it. Many toxic people lack both. They do not see their behavior as problematic, or if they acknowledge issues, they blame external factors rather than taking responsibility. Without recognition of the problem and authentic desire to change, no meaningful transformation occurs. Second, it is not your responsibility to fix or save someone else, particularly when they are actively harming you. This is perhaps the hardest truth for many people to accept, especially those with caretaking tendencies or those who have been taught that love means endless sacrifice. But setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm helps no one. You cannot love someone into health if they are not willing to do the work themselves. Your loyalty to them should not supersede your loyalty to your own well-being. Third, leaving a toxic relationship or limiting contact with a toxic person does not make you a bad person. It makes you someone who values yourself enough to stop accepting treatment that damages you. The toxic person may accuse you of abandonment, selfishness, or cruelty. Others who do not understand the full situation may judge your choice. But you do not owe anyone access to you at the expense of your mental health and safety. The process of leaving or limiting a toxic relationship typically involves several stages. First comes recognition. That moment when you finally see the relationship clearly, when the fog of manipulation lifts enough to acknowledge that this is not normal, not healthy, not acceptable. Recognition can take years, as toxic people are often skilled at keeping you confused and off balance. It may come suddenly, triggered by a particularly egregious incident, or gradually, as you piece together patterns you had previously dismissed or rationalized. After recognition comes the decision phase. You must decide what you want to do with your new understanding. This stage often involves ambivalence, part of you wants to leave or establish firm boundaries, recognizing intellectually that the relationship is harmful. But another part of you may hold on to hope that things will get better, may fear the unknown of life without this person, may worry about how you will manage practically or emotionally on your own. This ambivalence is normal. Change is frightening, even when the current situation is harmful. If you decide to end the relationship or significantly limit contact, the next phase is planning. This is particularly important in situations involving abuse or severe manipulation, where the person might retaliate when they realize you are creating distance. Planning might involve practical considerations. Where will you live if you are leaving a live-in partner? How will you handle shared finances? If children are involved, what custody and visitation arrangements need to be established? Planning also involves emotional preparation and support, identifying people who can help you, perhaps staying with friends or family, arranging for therapy, documenting concerning behaviors in case legal protections become necessary. The actual separation or boundary setting phase is often the most difficult. Toxic people rarely accept boundaries or endings gracefully. They may escalate their behavior in an attempt to regain control. They might love bomb you, temporarily becoming the person you wished they would be all along, promising change and begging for another chance. Or they might become hostile, threatening, or desperate. They may spread rumors, turn others against you, or attempt to sabotage your life in various ways. This phase requires tremendous strength and support. Following separation or significant boundary establishment comes a period of grief and adjustment. Even when leaving a harmful relationship, you will likely experience grief. You grieve the loss of who you hoped this person would be, the relationship you wanted but never had. You grieve time invested, opportunities missed, versions of yourself that were lost to the toxicity. You may also grieve the practical changes in your life, living situations, social circles, routines. Allow yourself to feel this grief. It does not mean you made the wrong choice. You can simultaneously know that leaving was necessary and still feel sad about the loss. The healing phase extends long after physical separation or boundary establishment. Toxic relationships leave deep wounds that require time and often professional support to heal. You must rebuild your sense of self, separate who you truly are from the distorted image the toxic person created. You must learn to trust again, both others and yourself. You must identify and challenge the negative beliefs about yourself that took root during the toxic relationship. You must develop new patterns of relating, recognizing, and avoiding red flags that might lead you into similar dynamics in the future. This healing is not linear. You will have good days and bad days. You may experience trauma responses, anxiety, hypervigilance, depression, even after physical distance from the toxic person. You might struggle with self-doubt, questioning whether the relationship was really that bad, whether you overreacted, whether you share blame for its failure. A skilled therapist can help you work through these normal responses to abnormal situations. Part of healing involves learning from the experience without letting it completely define you or close you off to future relationships. This requires delicate balance. You must be willing to examine what made you vulnerable to this toxic relationship, what warning signs you missed or ignored, what internal patterns or beliefs need to change to prevent similar situations in the future. But this examination should not become self-blame. Having been manipulated or hurt by a toxic person does not mean there is something wrong with you. It means you encountered someone who operates with fundamentally different values and methods than healthy people do. As you heal, you may notice patterns emerging. Perhaps you have a tendency to ignore your own needs in service of others. Perhaps you were taught as a child that love requires self-sacrifice, that setting boundaries is selfish, that family must be maintained regardless of behavior. Perhaps you have never learned what healthy relationships actually look like, so you accept treatment that would be clearly unacceptable to someone with different modeling. Recognizing these patterns is not about blaming yourself. It is about understanding so you can make different choices going forward. Recovery also involves reconnecting with parts of yourself that were suppressed or lost during the toxic relationship. What hobbies or interests did you abandon? What friendships did you let fade? What dreams or goals did you set aside? What aspects of your personality did you hide or minimize to avoid conflict? Reclaiming these parts of yourself is both healing and empowering. You begin to remember who you are beyond the narrow, diminished version of yourself that existed within the toxic relationship. Building new, healthy relationships becomes an important part of moving forward. This might feel scary after what you have been through. You may find yourself hyper-vigilant for red flags, perhaps seeing toxicity where it does not exist, or withdrawing at the first sign of conflict. Or you might swing the other direction, so desperate for connection and validation that you ignore warning signs you have learned to recognize. Healing involves finding balance, remaining open to connection while maintaining appropriate caution, trusting gradually as people demonstrate their trustworthiness through consistent behavior over time. What do healthy relationships look like? They involve mutual respect, with both parties valuing each other's thoughts, feelings, and autonomy. There is reciprocity. Both people invest in the relationship, both people give and receive support. Boundaries are respected without resentment. Conflict happens but is handled constructively, with both parties able to express needs and work toward solutions. There is consistency. People show up reliably, follow through on commitments, and treat you well, even when they are stressed or upset. There is growth, with both parties encouraging each other's development rather than feeling threatened by it. In healthy relationships, you feel safe expressing your authentic self. You do not have to hide parts of your personality, suppress your opinions, or walk on eggshells to avoid conflict. You can make mistakes without fear of disproportionate consequences. You can disagree without the relationship being threatened. You can have needs without being made to feel selfish or burdensome. You feel better about yourself, not worse, as a result of the relationship. Trust is present in healthy relationships, built gradually through consistent, trustworthy behavior. Words match actions. Promises are kept. Honesty prevails even when truth is difficult. There is vulnerability. Both parties can share fears, insecurities, and struggles without those revelations being used as weapons later. There is empathy, with each person genuinely caring about the other's well-being and happiness. Healthy relationships also include accountability. When someone hurts you, even unintentionally, they acknowledge it, apologize genuinely, and make efforts to avoid repeating the harm. They take responsibility for their actions and their impact. They do not become defensive or turn the situation around to make it about your flaws. They care that they hurt you and want to make it right. The difference between healthy relationships and toxic ones is stark once you know what to look for. Healthy relationships energize you, even when they involve difficult conversations or challenges. Toxic relationships drain you, leaving you depleted and questioning yourself. Healthy relationships enhance your life, adding support, joy, and connection. Toxic relationships diminish your life, taking away your peace, your confidence, and your sense of self. As you rebuild your life after exposure to toxic people, you may find unexpected gifts emerging from the pain. Many survivors report developing greater emotional intelligence, better able to read people and situations. You become more discerning about who you allow into your inner circle. You learn to trust your instincts, recognizing that uneasy feeling that tells you something is wrong even when you cannot articulate exactly what. You develop stronger boundaries, clearer about what you need, and more willing to protect those needs. The experience can also cultivate compassion, both for yourself and for others who struggle with toxic people. You understand firsthand how difficult it is to leave, how confusing these relationships can be, how much courage it takes to set boundaries and prioritize your own well-being. This understanding can help you support others in similar situations without judgment, offering the validation and encouragement you wish you had received earlier. Many survivors also develop a deeper appreciation for healthy relationships once they know the contrast. The friend who consistently shows up, who listens without making it about themselves, who celebrates your successes without jealousy, you no longer take these qualities for granted. The partner who respects your boundaries, who handles conflict maturely, who treats you with consistent kindness, you recognize these as precious rather than expected. Having experienced toxicity makes you more grateful for health. Yet even with healing and growth, you may carry scars. Certain triggers might always activate old wounds, a tone of voice that reminds you of the toxic person's contempt, a situation that echoes past manipulation, an anniversary or location tied to painful memories. These responses do not mean you have failed to heal. They are normal reactions to trauma, and they typically become less intense and less frequent with time and processing. It is important to recognize that recovery from toxic relationships is a journey with no fixed endpoint. You do not reach a destination where you are fully healed and never think about the experience again. Rather, you reach a place where the experience no longer controls you, where you have integrated it into your life story without letting it define you completely. You can think about what happened without being overwhelmed. You can talk about it without spiraling. You can encounter reminders without being derailed. Part of this journey involves developing a nuanced understanding of toxicity itself. Not everyone who hurts you is toxic. Not every conflict indicates a toxic relationship. Healthy people make mistakes, act selfishly sometimes, say hurtful things in moments of stress or pain. The difference lies in the pattern and the response. A healthy person who hurts you will acknowledge it, feel genuine remorse, and work to avoid repeating the harm. A toxic person will deny, deflect, or double down, making you the problem for being hurt. Similarly, not every person with toxic traits is irredeemable or incapable of change. Some people who display toxic behaviors are themselves victims of trauma or poor modeling, operating from pain and dysfunction rather than malice. With awareness, commitment, and often professional help, people can identify and change toxic patterns. The question is whether they are willing to do this work and whether staying in relationship with them, while they may or may not change, is healthy for you. Your responsibility is not to diagnose or fix toxic people. Your responsibility is to protect yourself, to recognize when a relationship is harming you, and to take appropriate action to preserve your well-being. This might mean setting boundaries within an ongoing relationship. It might mean limiting contact significantly. It might mean ending the relationship entirely. Only you can determine what is right for your situation, based on the specifics of the relationship, the severity of the toxicity, the presence or absence of genuine change, and your own needs and limits. As you navigate relationships moving forward, certain principles can guide you. First, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, honor that feeling, even if you cannot immediately articulate what the problem is. Your instincts are picking up on cues that your conscious mind may not yet recognize. Second, watch for patterns rather than isolated incidents. Everyone has bad days or moments they are not proud of. Toxic people demonstrate consistent patterns of harmful behavior. Third, pay attention to how people treat others, especially those with less power. Someone who is cruel to wait staff or dismissive of service workers will eventually treat you the same way. Fourth, believe people when they show you who they are. If someone repeatedly demonstrates that they are unreliable, manipulative, or uncaring, Believe those demonstrations rather than their words about who they want to be or claim to be. Fifth, recognize that you cannot change someone who does not want to change. You can express your needs, set boundaries, and make decisions about your own participation in the relationship, but you cannot make another person become someone they are not. Sixth, remember that you deserve respect, kindness, and consideration. These are not bonuses for exceptional behavior. They are baseline requirements for any healthy relationship. The reality is that toxic people exist in every community, every workplace, every family. You cannot completely avoid encountering them, but you can become skilled at recognizing them early, before they gain a foothold in your life. You can develop the strength to set and maintain boundaries that protect you. You can build a life filled with enough healthy relationships that toxic ones stand out clearly as aberrations rather than norms. This skill of recognition and protection is not paranoia or cynicism. It is wisdom born of experience. It is self-preservation practiced with intention. It is the acknowledgement that while you cannot control how others treat you, you can absolutely control whether you continue accepting treatment that harms you. You can choose to surround yourself with people who enhance your life rather than diminish it, who lift you up rather than tear you down, who respect your humanity even in moments of disagreement or difficulty. The journey of learning to identify and protect yourself from toxic people is simultaneously a journey of learning your own worth. Every boundary you set is an affirmation that you matter, that your well-being is important, that you deserve to be treated well. Every time you walk away from toxicity, you demonstrate to yourself that you value your peace more than the false comfort of familiar dysfunction. Every healthy relationship you cultivate is evidence that you are worthy of kindness, respect, and genuine care. There will be moments of doubt. Toxic people are often skilled at making you question yourself, and their voices may linger in your mind long after you have created physical distance. In these moments, return to what you know to be true. Review the evidence of their behavior, the patterns documented in journals or saved messages. Talk to trusted friends who witnessed the relationship and can reflect back reality when you start to doubt it. Remind yourself that prioritizing your well-being is not selfish. It is necessary. You may also encounter people who do not understand your choices, who pressure you to reconcile with toxic family members, to give someone one more chance, to forgive and forget. These pressures often come from people who have not experienced the specific toxicity you endured, or who hold beliefs about relationships, particularly family relationships, that prioritize form over function, maintaining the appearance of connection even when the reality is harmful. You do not owe anyone an explanation of your choices, but if you choose to respond, you might simply state that you are prioritizing your mental health and well-being, and that this is non-negotiable. Remember, too, that while identifying toxic people is important, it should not become an obsession that sees toxicity everywhere or prevents you from being open to connection. The goal is not to become suspicious of everyone or to avoid vulnerability entirely. The goal is to develop discernment, the ability to recognize red flags and patterns that indicate toxicity while remaining open to healthy relationships that involve normal human imperfections, occasional conflicts, and the messiness that comes with genuine connection. Healthy skepticism differs from cynicism. Healthy skepticism says, I will pay attention to patterns of behavior and make decisions based on demonstrated trustworthiness. Cynicism says, everyone will eventually hurt me, so I will not let anyone get close. Healthy skepticism protects you while leaving room for connection. Cynicism protects you by preventing any genuine intimacy. The former allows you to build a life rich in meaningful relationships. The latter leaves you isolated, safe, perhaps, but alone. The skills you develop through the painful process of identifying and extricating yourself from toxic relationships serve you throughout life. You become better at recognizing your own needs and advocating for them. You develop stronger communication skills, learning to express boundaries clearly and assertively. You cultivate emotional resilience, the capacity to weather difficult emotions and experiences without being destroyed by them. You learn that you are stronger than you knew, capable of surviving and eventually thriving even after experiences that nearly broke you. These skills extend beyond romantic relationships or friendships. They apply in workplaces where you can recognize toxic bosses or colleagues and strategize accordingly. They apply in community organizations where you can identify when group dynamics are becoming unhealthy. They apply even to your relationship with yourself, helping you recognize when your own internal voice has become toxic, criticizing and shaming you in ways that mirror the treatment you received from others. Developing a healthier internal dialogue is often a crucial part of recovery from toxic relationships. The toxic person's criticisms have been internalized, becoming the way you speak to yourself. Healing requires identifying these harsh internal voices and deliberately replacing them with kinder, more accurate self-talk. This is not about delusional positivity or refusing to acknowledge areas where you can improve. It is about treating yourself with the same compassion and encouragement you would offer a dear friend, recognizing your worth independent of your achievements or others' validation. As you heal and grow, you may find yourself drawn to helping others who are experiencing toxic relationships. This impulse is generous and understandable. You want to spare others the pain you endured, to offer the support you wish you had received. This can be meaningful work, whether through formal channels like becoming a therapist or support group facilitator, or informally through being present for friends and family members navigating their own toxic situations. However, be mindful of your own boundaries and well-being as you support others. You cannot force someone to leave a toxic relationship before they are ready. You cannot make someone see toxicity they are not yet able to recognize. You can offer information, support, and validation, but ultimately, each person must make their own choices in their own time. Watching someone you care about stay in a toxic relationship that is clearly harming them is heartbreaking, but respecting their autonomy is essential. Be a resource and a safe haven when they are ready, without pushing so hard that they feel judged or defensive. Also be aware that helping others can sometimes become a way of avoiding your own healing work. If you find yourself overly focused on fixing others' toxic relationships while neglecting your own recovery, this pattern warrants examination. Sometimes we focus outward because our own pain feels too overwhelming to address directly. A therapist can help you discern healthy support of others from unhealthy avoidance of your own process. The broader societal context of toxic relationships also deserves consideration. We live in cultures that often normalize certain toxic behaviors, particularly in romantic relationships. The idea that love should be dramatic and tumultuous, that jealousy indicates passion, that partners should complete each other rather than complement each other. These romantic myths can make toxic dynamics seem desirable rather than dangerous. Media depictions often glamorize possessiveness, control disguised as protection, and the notion that love conquers all, including abusive behavior. Similarly, cultural messages about family, that blood is thicker than water, that you must honor and maintain relationships with family members regardless of their behavior, that cutting off family is shameful or wrong, can trap people in toxic family dynamics. Questioning these cultural narratives is part of developing the discernment to identify and exit toxic relationships. You can honor the positive intention behind these messages while recognizing that they do not apply universally. that some relationships are so harmful that maintaining them is more destructive than ending them. Gender dynamics also play a role in how toxic relationships develop and are perceived. Women are often socialized to prioritize others' needs, to be accommodating and nurturing, to maintain relationships even at great personal cost. These socialization patterns can make women particularly vulnerable to certain types of toxic relationships and particularly reluctant to set boundaries or leave. Men, on the other hand, may be socialized to suppress emotions, to view vulnerability as weakness, and to maintain dominance in relationships. Socialization that can both create toxic behavior and prevent men from recognizing or admitting when they are in toxic relationships. These gendered patterns are not absolute. People of all genders can be victims or perpetrators of toxicity, but being aware of how socialization influences relationship dynamics can help in recognizing and addressing toxic patterns. It can also cultivate compassion for how difficult it is to go against deeply ingrained messages about how we should behave in relationships and what we should tolerate. The economic and practical realities of toxic relationships also cannot be ignored. Leaving is often presented as simple, just walk away. But the reality is frequently much more complicated. Financial dependence, shared children, immigration status, disability, lack of housing alternatives, health insurance tied to a spouse's employment. These and many other practical factors can make leaving extraordinarily difficult, even when someone clearly recognizes the relationship is toxic. Acknowledging these complexities without using them as reasons to never leave is important. Yes, leaving may be difficult and require significant planning and support. And yes, in most cases, staying in a severely toxic relationship is ultimately more harmful than the difficulties of leaving. For those in situations where leaving feels impossible, harm reduction becomes the focus. How can you protect yourself as much as possible within the relationship? This might mean keeping important documents in a safe place, maintaining a separate bank account if possible, cultivating relationships outside the toxic one, developing a safety plan for when conflict escalates, and seeking therapy or support groups to maintain perspective and process your experiences. Harm reduction acknowledges that sometimes people cannot immediately exit toxic situations and focuses on minimizing damage in the meantime. Technology has introduced new dimensions to toxic relationships. Social media provides platforms for stalking, harassment, and public shaming. Phones and GPS enable tracking and monitoring. Joint accounts and devices can be used to surveil and control. Digital communication can be weaponized, with toxic people using texts and emails to gaslight, sending barrages of messages to overwhelm and control, or strategically withholding communication to create anxiety. Being aware of these digital tactics is part of protecting yourself in modern toxic relationships. Conversely, technology also offers resources that previous generations lacked. Online support groups connect you with others who understand your experience. Educational resources help you recognize toxic patterns and learn strategies for protection and healing. Therapy is now available online, making it accessible to people who cannot easily attend in-person sessions. Apps can help you document incidents, track patterns, or practice coping skills. The key is using technology intentionally to support your well-being rather than allowing it to become another avenue for toxic control. The COVID-19 pandemic brought new challenges to identifying and managing toxic relationships. Lockdowns and quarantines forced people into continuous close proximity with family members or partners, intensifying already toxic dynamics and making escape more difficult. The stress and uncertainty of the pandemic also exacerbated toxic behaviors, with some people becoming more controlling, more volatile, or more manipulative. At the same time, the pause in normal activities and social connections gave some people the space to recognize toxicity they had previously been too busy to fully acknowledge. As we emerge from the pandemic, the lessons learned about which relationships sustained us and which depleted us during that time can guide decisions about how to structure life going forward. The people who showed up for you, who supported you without demanding that you perform gratitude or reciprocate in specific ways, who respected your boundaries and fears, these are relationships worth nurturing. The people who used the pandemic as an opportunity to increase control, who dismissed your concerns, who made the difficult situation more stressful, these relationships warrant serious reconsideration. Looking at toxic relationships through a developmental lens can also be illuminating. What we learn about relationships in childhood profoundly shapes our adult relationship patterns. Children who grow up in toxic family environments often develop adaptations that help them survive those environments but create problems in adult relationships. For example, a child who learns to be hypervigilant to a parent's mood, constantly monitoring for signs of displeasure and adjusting behavior accordingly, may carry this pattern into adult relationships, becoming anxious and people-pleasing even with partners who are not actually threatening. Similarly, children who witness one parent emotionally abuse another may internalize this as normal relationship dynamics, either accepting similar treatment in their own adult relationships or perpetrating it themselves. Children who are scapegoated or made to feel responsible for family problems may grow up with a distorted sense of responsibility, feeling that everything that goes wrong in relationships is their fault. Recognizing these developmental patterns is not about blaming your parents or excusing your own relationship choices. It is about understanding the roots of your patterns so you can make conscious choices to develop healthier ones. Therapy modalities specifically designed to address relational trauma can be particularly helpful in healing from toxic relationships. Attachment-focused therapy explores how early relationship patterns influence current relationships and helps develop more secure attachment styles. Internal family systems therapy works with different parts of yourself, including wounded parts that may be driving you toward toxic relationships and protective parts that may be keeping you isolated. Somatic therapies address the ways trauma and toxic relationships register in the body, helping release stored tension and develop new embodied responses to triggers. EMDR, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, can help process traumatic memories from toxic relationships, reducing their emotional charge and allowing you to remember what happened without being overwhelmed. Group therapy provides community and normalization, helping you recognize that you are not alone in your experiences. Couples counseling can sometimes be beneficial if both parties are committed to changing toxic patterns, though it is generally contraindicated in cases of abuse, as it can provide the abuser with more information to use manipulatively and can put the victim at greater risk. The concept of post-traumatic growth offers hope for those recovering from toxic relationships. Post-traumatic growth refers to positive psychological changes that can occur as a result of struggling with highly challenging life circumstances. People who have experienced and worked through trauma, including relational trauma, often report increased appreciation for life, changed priorities, a sense of new possibilities, more meaningful relationships, greater personal strength, and spiritual development. The suffering caused by toxic relationships is real and should not be minimized. And from that suffering, with support and intentional healing work, growth can emerge. This does not mean you should be grateful for toxic relationships or that the abuse was somehow worth it because of what you learned. It simply means that humans have a remarkable capacity to find meaning and cultivate growth even in painful experiences. You can acknowledge both the harm done and the strength you developed in surviving and healing from that harm. Both truths can coexist. As we near the end of this exploration of identifying toxic people, it is worth reflecting on what we hope to gain from this knowledge. The goal is not to become jaded or suspicious, seeing potential toxicity in every relationship. The goal is not to achieve perfect immunity from ever being hurt, which is impossible because hurt is an inherent risk of any meaningful connection. The goal is to develop the wisdom to recognize patterns that indicate toxicity, the strength to set and maintain boundaries that protect your well-being, and the self-worth to refuse accepting treatment that diminishes you. It is to trust yourself, your perceptions, your feelings, your right to say no and mean it. It is to surround yourself with people who enhance your life rather than drain it, who celebrate your growth rather than fear it, who treat you with consistent kindness and respect. It is to know that you are worthy of healthy relationships and to settle for nothing less, even if that means going without certain relationships entirely, rather than accepting toxic ones. Most fundamentally, learning to identify toxic people is part of the larger journey of learning to value yourself. Every time you recognize toxic behavior and refuse to accept it, you are affirming your worth. Every boundary you set says, "I matter, and I will not allow myself to be treated in ways that communicate otherwise." Every toxic relationship you exit or limit says, "I deserve better, and I will not settle for less out of fear or loneliness or misguided loyalty." This journey is not easy. It requires courage to see clearly what you might prefer to deny. It requires strength to set boundaries when others pressure you to be accommodating. It requires faith in yourself when toxic people and their enablers tell you that you are the problem. But this journey is worth taking because the alternative, remaining in toxic relationships that slowly corrode your sense of self, is far more painful in the long run. As you close your eyes tonight, settling into sleep, carry with you this truth. You are worthy of relationships that honor your humanity, that celebrate your authentic self, that contribute to rather than detract from your well-being. You have the capacity to recognize toxicity when you encounter it. You have the right to protect yourself from people who harm you, regardless of who those people are or what societal expectations suggest you should tolerate. You have everything you need within you to build a life filled with healthy, nourishing relationships. The work of identifying toxic people and healing from toxic relationships is challenging, but it is also deeply worthwhile. On the other side of this work lies a version of yourself who knows your worth, who trusts your perceptions, who maintains boundaries that protect your peace. A version of yourself who chooses relationships wisely and releases those that no longer serve your highest good. A version of yourself who has transformed the pain of toxic relationships into wisdom, strength, and a deep appreciation for genuine connection. May you move forward with clarity and compassion, clarity about what you will and will not accept, and compassion for yourself and others as you navigate the complex landscape of human relationships. May you trust your instincts when they whisper warnings about someone's behavior. May you find the courage to set boundaries even when others call you selfish for doing so. May you surround yourself with people who see you, value you, and treat you with the respect and kindness you deserve. And may you always remember that learning to identify and protect yourself from toxic people is not cynicism. It is wisdom. It is not hardness. It is appropriate self-protection. It is not giving up on humanity. It is honoring your own humanity enough to insist it be honored by others. Sweet dreams, and may you wake tomorrow with renewed commitment to valuing yourself and accepting nothing less than healthy, respectful, life-enhancing relationships. If you found this exploration helpful, please consider subscribing to DREAMLAB Knowledge and leaving a like. Share this with anyone who might benefit from understanding the dynamics of toxic relationships. Your engagement helps us continue creating content that supports your journey toward greater self-awareness and healthier connections. Until next time, take gentle care of yourself. You deserve it.